Welcome to Family Recipe Radio. Yeah, can you imagine if that was my voice? It might be kind of fun, actually. Maybe I'll do an episode like that. But that's not why I'm here today. Today, I'm going to ask the question, how do I have the worst trip possible? What is the scariest drug I could possibly do? Is it Benadryl? Is it DXM? Is it PCP? Close, but no cigar on any of these. There's only one king of bad trips, and it's a plant called Datura. Now, it's unlike a lot of other psychedelic plants. I wouldn't call it a psychedelic. It's not classified as such. It's far more confusing and dark and mysterious than, let's say, mushrooms or LSD. This is the only substance that I think the cliche of seeing pink elephants would actually happen on. You totally lose perception of normal reality and you're lost in your hallucinations. And there's a very magical element to this experience. It's been used in shamanism and witchcraft and different types of sorcery all over the globe for hundreds, probably thousands of years actually, or millions. Who knows how long people have been here? I don't fucking know. I haven't seen the entire timeline. They could be lying to us. But anyway, it has a long history of use, is what I'm saying. And actually, it's been used as a punishment in certain cultures, which is great. I think that's a great punishment. Imagine if you fail a math class, and then all of a sudden you're eating cereal, and there's a bunch of spiders crawling out of it, and you're trying to smoke a cigarette, but it keeps disappearing from your hand, and then you realize it wasn't even a bowl of cereal, it was just a muddy puddle on the ground, and then you wake up in jail. I definitely would have passed Algebra 2 if that was the case. I would have done my homework. I'll tell you what. In all seriousness, though, there's something truly magical about these experiences, almost stereotypically magical. Like, this is the exact world that I think a cartoon witch would probably come from. It's a place populated by talking animals, spirits and ghosts, evil cackles, never-ending dreams and apparitions flying through the air. And it's all just one cup of tea away.
Jimson weed, also known as angel's trumpet or loco weed, comes from the plant Datura stramonium. Ingestion of the plant can cause high fever, severe dehydration, rapid heart rate, and result in seizures.
What can this do to you?
It can kill you. You can die easily.
Well, it's crazy. I mean, from my experiences, it's one of the stupidest things I've ever done in my life.
If you ever wanted to know exactly what Jimson weed could do to you, pay very close attention to what you're about to see.
Warning, warning. Now we have our first ever Family Recipe Radio disclaimer. Do not consume Datura. I am not trying to glorify this. I'm not trying to suggest anyone does this for themselves. It will not be a happy ending, most likely. It is quite dangerous. The effects of the plant alone can kill you, let alone the loss of touch with reality. It's quite dangerous, and this is for entertainment and educational purposes only. Now that we've got that out of the way, let's dive in to the terrifying land of Datura. First up, we have 3 Weeks in Its Reality by Oliver. I first approached Brugmansia with great trepidation and expectation. I boiled 2 liters of water and added 16 finely chopped flowers, approximately 30 leaves, and a few thick stems. After straining, I shared 660 milliliters between 3 people, Oliver, Dave, and Matt. The rest was frozen. The earthy brown liquid tasted bland and went down effortlessly. We decided to vaporize some cannabis, eat some space cake, and go on a drive while it took effect. Yes, that's always good when you're waiting for Datura to kick in. Get behind the wheel as quick as you possibly can before you forget what a car is. 30 minutes post-ingestion, a dreamy sedation set in, with a free-falling sensation similar to ketamine or nutmeg, like I was sinking into my seat. The same mundane views I see every day seemed outstanding, as if I were looking at them for the very first time, with the brightness turned up 10 times. I tried to drop my friends at home so I could meditate back at the apartment without any distractions, but when Matt opens the car door, he collapses head first onto the pavement before staggering back to his feet and then falling again. I got out with the intention of helping, but only succeeded in making a public spectacle of myself. I vibrated like a block of jelly all over the place, with my pelvis swaying in every conceivable direction. We were in a busy part of town and people were gathering in bewilderment. Someone shouted, "Oh my God, how pissed are they?" To cut a long story short, I return home with Dave, who refused to get out, and left Matt to be escorted home by the police. We pulled up at my apartment and I swaggered inside, leaving Dave alone in the car. I can't remember the first hallucination or even thinking the tea was working. Every idea of past, present, future, or Brugmansia tea was gone. Oliver was now an empty shell in a blurry dreamscape of delusional chaos. Extreme disassociation left emotional concepts totally void. This felt quite liberating because there was temporarily no more desire, craving, habit, or fear. I have a phobia of spiders, but felt nothing when hundreds of hand-sized spiders scurried down my wall and into my mold-covered bed. The Grim Reaper stood in the corner of the room. I slurred hello, and he waved back at me. Demonic bats flew through my head, and imaginary glasses of water moved back as I leaned in to grab them. Fleas covered my ceiling and hopped upside down as if gravity had been reversed. I knew what I was seeing wasn't possible, but it looked too real to be an illusion. I grabbed a fly spray bottle and began spraying flea-infested areas. The interesting thing was that individual fleas dropped to the floor and died after coming into contact with the spray. I could fully interact with every hallucination. I lay in bed for a while, watching white doves swoop back and forth, pecking one another. I'm not sure if they were playing or fighting. They morphed into huge spiders, then again into insects. Then I noticed a red dog tearing a chicken's head off a few feet in front of me. I reached out to touch them, but my hand went straight through. At this point, the doorbell rang. It was Dave asking the whereabouts of Matt. Neither of us had any recollection of abandoning him. "Come in. I think he's upstairs." We spent a while looking for him. "There's definitely someone else here." Dave replies he's also seeing people and sits down in the living room. I was exhausted and got back in bed. I couldn't sleep, so I kept walking into different rooms, then forgetting what I was doing there. I occasionally passed Dave on the way to the toilet and asked him what he was doing in my apartment. Sometime later, he walked home. The following day, he told me he kept speaking to Matt, but then he'd realized he wasn't there. Deep into the trip, I became aware I could move inanimate objects without the use of physical contact. Telekinesis seemed perfectly normal in the Brugmansia reality. With only a pointed finger, I could shift real dog toys from one side of the hallway to the other. Each toy had a colorful trail as it drifted across the carpet. 14 hours post-ingestion, I went to sleep in the living room. There were too many insects in my bedroom. The following day, I had to work as a dinner man in a local school. I was still very high, and I tried to phone in sick, but as the secretary answered the phone, I forgot who I was talking to and what I was supposed to say. I mumble something about a friend in intensive care. The secretary tells me I have to come to work, so I turn up in dark sunglasses, which I wear all day. I was now suffering from severe perspective distortion, which really isn't a good thing when you've got to serve dinner to 75 kids. The problem I had with imaginary objects moving away from me was now happening with real objects. I made a fool of myself and resigned. My eyesight gradually returned to normal 2 days after ingestion, and the hallucinations tapered off over the following 3. However, the trip was far from over. I was in a drunken stupor for weeks and began hearing voices. Whenever I smoked cannabis, things really spiraled out of control. I became delusional and paranoid. The voices multiplied and became even clearer, and my entire field of vision was overcome by kaleidoscope patterns. These effects were enjoyable for a week. Then I got the fear. I tried to write it out, but I felt like a complete mess, and my family kept telling me I had taken too many drugs. After 2.5 weeks of delusional paranoia, I decided to throw away all my cannabis plants and 3 ounces of high-potency cannabis. Within a month of sobriety, I returned to normal. Damn, kicking it off with a bang. Holy shit. Demonic bats. The Grim Reaper. It's like he was stuck in the dimension that Black Sabbath comes from for 2 weeks. I don't know how he didn't go insane, like actually insane permanently. Also, I do feel kind of bad for Matt. I know they had no idea what was going on, but they did just like abandon their friend to the police. But if you're Matt out there, please call me. Did you get any charges? What happened? I feel like you had the craziest trip out of anybody this night. Anyway, we must continue on our way now, so here we go. This next one is a bit of a famous trip report, if there can be such a thing. A lot of people have read this, but I'm gonna try my hand at it because it's one of my favorite ones out there. A Rebirth by Word. My experience with Datura Stramonium was synchronistic with my expanding awareness. It marks a gateway from the world I was reared in the world I now walk in. Without an extensive history of my growth, from puberty to the day I ingested the sacred plant, simply recounting the experience itself would be fruitless. I'll spare the reader great detail, but some history should be shared. It was autumn. I was 20 when I consumed the seeds of a withered jimsonweed plant in a field of shale in the foothills of Appalachia. I'd been wandering for months already after leaving my anthropology studies in college in search of something real. My life to that point seemed to be a cycle of rearing, then disillusionment, and I had reached a very weary state. After turning my back on my faith at 15, my belief in history's interpretation and philosophy at 17, my worldview and lifestyle at 19, and even my ability to conceive at 20, I felt naked and alone in a very cold world. I was living as a vagrant and wandered away, only away from all that was familiar. All seemed ill. I had been fasting and having dreams with meaning that led me to asceticism. I'd lived as a vegan for some time when I ate at all. I felt like I had been infected by the original sin, even if that was something so abstract it couldn't be rationalized. I was ready to die, but I didn't even have the volition to push myself that far. The dreams showed me glimpses of something that I felt closer to in the wilderness. When my friend from childhood told me he'd spoken to animals while under the influence of Datura, I needed no more motivation. I could feel it was an order immediately. I wish I had the proper venue to explain more. I feel that sharing would be correct. I consumed the weeds of a withered seed pod or two, which would amount to a heaping tablespoon, and about 4 hours later, the experience began. The onset involved losing touch with material reality. Things appeared, disappeared, and seemed in between constantly. I didn't have any concern, though. I was a totally detached observer. Then I lost touch with my body. My legs wobbled. My arms went farther or not as far as I seemed to wield them. I felt like I was swaying when I was not. Then, a great many visitors came and spoke to me. It seemed as though people I had known throughout my past were coming back and reminding me of lessons I learned. Mythical characters, holy men, teachers, fictitious characters, even TV personalities, and past masters, all reminded me of insights that I had gained from them. This lasted for hours, as my friend later told me. I recall at the end of this, they might just stand beside me silently, and I could see a light behind them and simply knew what they meant. Then, an overpowering urge to urinate carried me to the toilet. I emptied a chalky white stream into the bowl and sighed heavily. All of a sudden, my mind was clear. I didn't know what was happening. This is when I entered what I will call a dream state. I opened the door to the restroom and the other side was vacant. I recall feeling as if a woman were embracing me and I fell into her cloak. I caught a glimpse of her face and an amulet just before falling. She was earthy and old. This is when things become too abstract to recount with mind. I recall feeling as if I was falling in whichever direction I struggled against. I so exerted myself that I then decided to give up and just fall. It was after a period of intense fear and struggle at the prospect of falling that I realized I was floating, and the more I let go, the more I was cradled. There is a period after that I won't explain because I feel only I understand it. What I can explain next was feeling the moonlight like a shower of cool warmth. I set out and roamed the hills, abandoning my keys, wallet, and shoes along the way. They felt so heavy, I recall. I recall speaking, using a vibrational voice, to plants of all kind. They would make me feel their place in life's web and taught me about mine. It was like visiting a place I'd never been and knowing everyone there already. It was beyond description. I felt at peace. I recall resting under the moon and then noticing a tick on me, then 2, then 5, and I couldn't swipe them off. They crawled furiously towards my head. At first I accepted it, as I had accepted falling, but I began to think about the situation and it brought dread to my mind. By then, these ticks and other crawling bugs were crawling into my nose, ears, mouth, eyes, every orifice. The more I decided to panic, the more I did, and I could feel my airways being choked. Then, as if the feminine character with the cloak was whispering to me, I let go again and accepted death. At that very moment, every crawling thing that was choking me was transformed into a ladybug, and in a wisp of red in the moonlight, flittered away. I was quiet again. Then, approaching from a distance, a dance by a feline-like feminine figure. It was incredible and I was deeply moved. Acrobatic, yet smooth and flowing, I was entranced. Then I realized she was a shadow. I realized the shadows all around me had begun to dance, so I joined them. There was visual music, and all around the shadows danced. They taught me to dance like them, and I felt so grateful that I cannot explain. There's another mysterious period here, a blur of abstract events. I then spoke to a dog for some time. Strange as it may sound, at first he was an old farmer leaning against a truck. He would nod as I told him things, mostly my deep feelings of goodness in seeing him well, which didn't seem strange at all. Then gradually, he responded more and more by turning his head and barking an old bloodhound-type bark. This too seemed normal. Then his guise was also canine. He told me of his life and how he longed to feel wild again before he passed. He was very old. He conveyed to me that I would do well to embrace a mystery within all things, even my own being. I understood then, but later had to meditate long to reach this again. I bid him adieu and wandered further. There's another phase now, which is a mixture of seeing things in decay. It's very difficult to convey, but it amounts to the fact that all is perpetually thriving and decaying. The next I recall, I was talking to a man in his house, which I had wandered into. Later he told me I woke him up by entering, and he asked what the hell I was doing there, and to get out. My response was an expression of innocence, recoiling from brutality. He said I examined everything in the room closely. At the time I recall seeing them as relics, and settling on his sofa and talking to him. Being well-versed with psychedelic experiences himself, he relaxed and tried to get information out of me. I recall him asking where I was from, and this is when normal processes began to return. I could tell him what state and city I was from, but he wanted to know where he was before I'd entered his home. He asked me how I got there, and I said, "My car." He asked what car, and I pointed to his. It really did look like a car I once owned at the time. Later, he heard me muttering to myself about things that seemed to remind him of a book he was reading concerning the Akashic records. Eventually, I felt I could walk back to my starting point. I then recall seeing the cloaked woman once more upon returning to my friend's home, but on second glimpse, I saw it was a heap of trash bags. This experience lasted 3 days, an utter time warp. Later, I found out that neighbors had seen me wandering in horse pastures, seeming to play like a small child might. I was mud-encrusted up to my knees and dirty all over, just wearing pants. I still have the impact of these events with me today. I know how to let go. I know how to let life flow through me. My life was greatly enriched. I feel being disillusioned and ready to die was what kept me afloat during the experience. Would I have choked to death if I hadn't? The feminine aspect of all these things has become the most fascinating and revered part of my life. The mystery has returned. I may never use Datura again. I don't hear the voice. As you can see, it's among one of the most risky trips I've ever encountered. After studying its traditional use, it's quite clear why the time was right. Yet, I'll never suggest someone use it in the way I did. Datura is beyond psychedelic. This next experience is also on the more serene side, but a little confusing, as they all are. It is called Not So Cold to Me by Indigo Sunrise. This has not been my first time experimenting with plants containing tropane alkaloids, but I will say that this was definitely my most notable experience with this type of plant, which also happens to be my favorite out of the tropane plants. The basic ingredient ratios for the brew were about 1/3 of a Brugmansia flower combined with roughly 15 leaves of Calea zekateki, both ingredients chopped finely. A pot with roughly 500 milliliters was brought to a boil, and the 2 herbs were added and left to boil for another 20 to 30 minutes with 2 peppermint and 1 chamomile tea bags for flavoring. It was sweetened to taste, ice cubes were added until lukewarm, and it was all strained. Another 1/3 of the Brugmansia flower was rolled into a joint with about 5 to 10 chopped Calea leaves. After consumption of the tea, I waited and relaxed for about 20 minutes before going out and smoking the rest of the mixture in a small joint. Not long after that did I start to experience the first telltale tropane effect for me, which is a strange taste in my mouth that lasts at least 24 hours after ingestion. The second symptom was starting to lose coordination and depth perception, with my mucous membranes drying up. I felt sick, like my stomach didn't want water, despite how dry my mouth felt. I decided it was time to say goodnight to my family and depart. I got into my bed, put some gentle music on, and tried to get some sleep. It was about 10:30 p.m. at this point. Slowly and slowly did I get sucked into the all-too-familiar feeling that insomniacs experience, not asleep but neither awake, yet trailing off on distant thought patterns. This continued on as my delirium began to grow over the hours. I felt that I also gained a profound increase in night vision ability. I had to turn the light on a couple of times as I was seeing ants carrying food from my window to the door or spiders on the window above me. Obviously, the Brugmansia was aware of my phobia for insects, but luckily I've worked on these phobias with the assistance of LSD and nature and was able to tell myself that these weren't real. I believe this was the first test for me. It would have been 2 a.m. at a guess when I felt reality and the environment around me dissolve, and suddenly I was at rest. I cannot say all of what happened to me during this time, but I vaguely recall having some vivid dreams until suddenly awoken, yet still in a heavy trance. A young lady that I didn't recognize had turned the light on. She felt so familiar, but I gathered that she was also very heavily affected and didn't remember why she had to stay at my place. Even her being a close friend was a possibility in my mind. She asked where she could sleep, so I told her of a fold-out lounge downstairs or a mattress under my brother's bed. She left for a few minutes and returned, saying she didn't want to wake the family. She opted to sleep on my double mattress with me. There were no sexual or intimate gestures involved other than when she placed a hand gently on the side of mine without even making eye contact. Her hand appeared most unusual, but I was in no state of mind to absorb and process such detail. I turned the light off and she appeared to sleep, despite me knowing she was always awake. She moved down a bit in a position so we were not facing head to head with each other. The moonlight coming through the window seemed to cast a black and white spell on everything. I believe the girl seemed to have very white skin under the moon, and her clothes were basic yet still modern. The colors were black, with parts being blue in different places. I decided to let her rest and try to get to further dreams, which took a while of me tossing and turning. I believed that showing purity of heart that remained untainted by sexual urges, although she was very beautiful, was the second test. The next stage was the most blurry. I felt I was constantly going in and out of consciousness into delirious encounters involving talking to friends. Each time I stopped talking to them, I realized I could firmly tell myself that this was an effect of the drug and they weren't real. I knew that if I touched them, they would disappear. Whenever this realization occurred, my environment dissolved again, bringing me back to my normal room with a still unknown girl lying very still next to me. I apologized for rambling delirious rubbish and explained that I was heavily under the influence of a substance. What made talking to her feel real was the fact that I easily recognized that when communicating, I was using my chest, throat, and mouth to propel my words, whereas the communications with my friends while dreaming felt as if there was literally myself and another person discussing something inside my own brain. I discovered this while waking up mid-sentence from a dream and hearing my voice propel the second part of the sentence, but not the first. This type of test continued in various ways or forms until 5:30 a.m., including the infamous cigarette vanishing from hand effect. Every time this happened, I thought to myself, I don't smoke in my own room. Where did my cigarette go? I ran out of cigarettes this afternoon. This isn't real. I continued reinforcing to myself that these were just illusions from the Brugmansia, and my head was not completely lost. I felt like the tests had all finished for now, and although I tried to ask her name, the words would not properly form and she gave no answer. I rolled over a little bit, and when I looked back, the face seemed to be covered in a blue, facial, moisturizing mask thingy instead. She smiled and looked away embarrassed, so I figured she thought I wasn't going to wake up for a while and she got bored. Later, reading into her various appearances displayed to me, she liked to use symbols to express that she can be fearless, loving, beautiful, ugly, mysterious, and human all at once. I said goodnight for the last time and fell asleep. I woke up half an hour later. I could hear my father's alarm for work ringing. It was approximately 6:45 a.m. and the girl had gone from my room, yet I could see the arrangements of covers indicating that a second person had indeed slept in the bed. I looked around with little success, felt a bit more sober and collected, and figured she just had to work and needed a place to crash for that reason. I had a shower and saw in the bathroom some strong blue moisturizing stuff that had been used but placed in a different position. All these things told me a girl had slept in my bed last night. It confused me. I got tested by the Brugmansia 2 more times by answering mobile calls from people I knew. Both times I was not actually carrying my mobile or a phone of any description. and I quickly became aware of that trick. Though, when my friend Josh called, I asked about a girl staying at my house, and he told me that when he drove past the house very late, there was a girl at my front door and he talked to her. Josh broke up before I could ask who she was, and I realized then that I was without my phone and Josh wouldn't call at 7 a.m. anyway. I was still obviously affected to some degree, but I could at least compose myself. I was determined to find out who this girl was, asking friends and telling them briefly of my story, convinced utterly she was not a hallucination, as all my communication with her seemed quite real. When she touched me, I could actually feel her, whereas the other hallucinations seemed to be like projections sent from my own brain and had no physical basis outside my own dream world. It's been about 24 hours since I consumed the mixture. My pupils are still dilated and I feel much more in tune with natural surroundings. I understood a conversation between birds and I was able to listen to my plants. Earlier this afternoon, I asked my mother if she saw the person that stayed over last night. I explained I was half asleep and told her to sleep on the sofa bed downstairs. My mother told me that at 3 a.m. she was sleeping on the fold-out bed herself. My mother was a little spooked by the concept, as all the doors were locked, yet she remembers a light being on in my room around 3 a.m., whereas I remember turning it off, sleeping, and getting woken up with the light on. I told her it could have been a crazy dream from the dream mixture I prepared, despite neither of us fully being convinced it was just a dream. It took me a little bit to sink in. My only basis of reality during that whole experience was centered on coming back to my bed after many confusing dreams that I felt forced to prove my strength of mind in. I quickly realized that she was the Brugmansia spirit manifesting as a beautiful young woman to me, actively testing me to earn her respect by proving myself to her. I understand now that she's accepted me as her pupil, if I so wish to take that road, but I realize how extremely powerful she is. I feel some strong bond with her, yet I don't know for certain whether I shall return for more lessons. I cannot express enough how much I'm amazed at her caring and protective side. I felt so safe with her around, even contemplating that I was lying next to a powerful plant spirit. It's not what I had expected, that's for certain. Be careful and take great care with her. She'll crush you if you cross her.
Datura is a horse of a different color. I don't consider it a true hallucinogen. I would classify it as a deliriant. I know that it's very big in magic, and I understand why, because it's a confusant. And magic depends on confusion. Even stage magic depends on a certain confusion. You're looking in the wrong place and so forth. And what Datura does, it's very hard to keep control of it. It erodes the core processes of the self so that you lose track of who you are, where you are, what exactly has happened. I took Datura several times in Nepal and had very strange experiences. I mean, they're not like other psychedelic experiences. I remember sitting in my little room in Bodenhof on the 3rd floor, and I had an open window. And I was sitting there alone, waiting for this stuff to come on, and then my mind would wander, and I would think, it's not working, it's just some kind of, it's crap, it's not working. And then I would kind of lose attention, and these literally ghost-like forms, wraiths, would come floating in my window like in a cartoon, and they were carrying large sheets of newsprint. And they would release this newsprint, and it would flutter down across the room and like land across my lap. And I would fall forward and be reading these stories. And as I read, I would realize, this is it. This is the answer. This is the... And I would like pull out of it, and then I say, it's not working. It's not working. And then go back into this weird place. Well, that went on for about a half an hour, but then in fact, this is what I referred to this morning when I said I've had many experiences where I was glad nobody else was there because I felt they would become alarmed and then create a brouhaha. And what happened in these Nepali experiences is I was then slowly became aware something was going on, and so I'm sitting there waiting for this thing to hit. Suddenly I lift my leg up and throw it behind my back, and then the other one, and then put my arm through, and I'm there in this totally spazzed out, knotted position. Say, this is weird. Very carefully unfold, lay down, breathe deeply, and then it would happen all over again. And I think, boy, I'm glad nobody else is here.
You've probably heard that voice before. That was Terence McKenna, of course. He doesn't have many Datura experiences, it would seem, but I thought I would include this one just for kicks. I used to listen to this dude all the time when I was younger, and it's good to hear his voice again, so R.I.P., Mr. McKenna. I hope you don't mind that your ghost has been frozen in YouTube for the foreseeable future. I know I wouldn't mind, but maybe it's preventing him from actually crossing over to the other side, but I hope not. God, that would suck. Now we're going to read Dark and Hopeless Hell by Tech22. This sounds ominous. When I was 18, I was in a strange place in the world. I was homeless, penniless, and with no real ambition to pull myself out of the gutter. Although I was without the basic necessities of food and shelter, I had a steady supply of drugs that were dispensed, I suppose, out of sympathy by many of my friends. I went to sleep hungry and cold every night, but never sober. One evening, before I left a party to hit the streets to find a broom closet or stairwell to lie my head, a guy I barely knew gave me a large freezer bag full of brown spiky pods. What are these? Jimson weed. The seeds will make you trip. Maybe you can sell them. I don't want them. He told me to split the pod open and eat half the seeds if I really wanted to trip hard. To me, that meant eat the whole pod, since I always found recommended dosages to be unsatisfying. I chose not to dose that night since I was already tired and afraid I might fall asleep before it kicked in. I slept in a building gutted by fire a few years before, and the freezing November air woke me just before dawn. I got up and walked into town to raise my body temperature and avoid hypothermia. This was my morning ritual. Obviously, 5 a.m. in a small city offers very little in terms of recreation, so I decided it was the right time to open the door of perception, and I began my day with a psychedelic breakfast. I chose the largest pod in the bag, which was also the darkest in color. I was told afterward the most potent seeds are the deepest brown. The seeds were terribly bitter, and many of the shells got stuck in my teeth. I managed to finish the entire pod with a little help from a public water fountain. I watched a beautiful sunrise from the roof of an apartment building, constantly waiting for the effects of Jimson weed to take hold. I can't say how long I sat until the seeds started working, but the first noticeable signs came in the form of extreme thirst and general physical discomfort. Finding the feelings of seeming dehydration too strong to ignore, I went to a nearby McDonald's for free iced water. It must have been after 9 because the only people in the restaurant were old guys getting free refills on senior citizen discounted coffee. I sat in a booth in the back corner sipping water through a cracked straw, watching the thirsty, elderly redneck parade. It didn't take long for me to realize I was entering a very hallucinogenic trip. The fact I hadn't eaten a real meal in a week and I was sleep deprived probably added to the drug's intensity, but I can't imagine a big dinner in a full 8 hours would have made much of a difference. Unlike the onset of E or acid, my mental state was very comfortable, but my physical condition felt quite unhealthy. The heavy sense of inebriation was quickly followed by powerful, disorienting visuals. Black cats milled about the floor in front of me, so numerous I couldn't even see the tile. They appeared wet and angry. There was deep crimson blood dripping from the ceiling. Everything was technicolor. The sense of detachment was strong, but I didn't feel strange. Each hallucination flowed into the next. I was holding a very old Bible in my lap. I couldn't figure out how to open it. Soon, it started to leak blood too. The more I struggled, the more it bled. As soon as I realized my efforts were futile, the book materialized into the air around me. It didn't seem strange to me. When I analyzed the room again, it was a bustling, futuristic metropolis. It appeared very large and very alien, with shining chrome and flashing lights everywhere. I began to feel discomfort and the strong urge to urinate simultaneously. Urinate. I staggered into the bathroom and vomited in the closet urinal right in front of an Amish man. Now, I live in South Central Pennsylvania, so it's very possible that he was really there, but considering my state and other people's accounts of Datura-induced visuals, I suspect he was just a hallucination. I do know that I relieved myself somewhere in the bathroom and left through the side exit adjacent to the laboratory door. The street outside was a scene of a World War II ravaged Europe. I don't know which country, but everyone on the street was garbed in Nazi military uniforms. I felt very threatened. I ran into the alley behind the parking lot and hid behind a pine tree. The anxiety soon ebbed, but the thirst and need to urinate returned. I knew I needed a comfort zone, a place to relax in. A friend lived nearby. I walked to his apartment complex and stood in front of the stairwell. The same crimson blood from McDonald's was cascading down the steps. It began to rise over my shoes, up my leg. A heavy sense of vertigo came over me. There's a memory gap between the stairs and my friend's apartment, but I ended up on his couch watching dolphins dive through the wall in a seamless loop. During my time there, I experienced the typical non-existent cigarette search and the disappearing person puzzle. I visited the bathroom many times, but eliminated very little. The sense of dehydration was unbearable. There was no comfort. I didn't recognize the people in the room. I asked the person closest to me where Bill was.
Bill's not here.
I closed my eyes to escape the growing sense of panic, but when my eyelids shut, all I saw was a new room with new people. Where was I? I tried to reopen my eyes, but it only revealed another room with yet more strangers. This went on and on. I didn't know if my eyes were open or shut. I didn't know where I was, what time it was, or what was happening. My panic turned into sensory collapse. Everything bled together and I felt a deep spiraling sensation engulf me. I lost all visual capabilities, but I still had a very real sense of touch. I was trapped in a small metallic box. It made perfect sense to me. I was dead. This was hell. There were no demons, no hellfire or brimstone, just a deep, complete feeling of darkness and hopelessness. This was the never-ending void, not at all how I'd imagined it, but worse than I ever thought it could be. I've had feelings of infinite emotion on acid trips and sensations of universal truth in K-holes, but this was the most profound reality I've ever experienced. My whole existence was put into perspective, and I was being punished for wasting the gift of life. I blacked out at some point in the box and woke up in my friend's apartment the next day. He said I was out for about 8 hours. The physical effects wore off a day later, but the psychological impression has yet to fade. Datura is boundless. Datura is powerful beyond words. Datura is poison. Huh. Oh, a bit intense, I would say. A bit intense. But still interesting. I do like the idea of a room being so full of cats you can't even see the floor. I want that to be my house at some point, just full of black cats. Full to the brim of screaming cats. The Halls of the Trumpet by Rosewine. I visited my friend and he informs me he's collected a Datura plant. I'm told it's like tripping on acid. I catch a glimpse of white flowers. I sit at the kitchen table and talk with my friend C. I do not oversee the brewing of the tea. There are 5 of us at the house. I drink 2 cups, and the liquid is dark brown. Within an hour, I'm wobbly and tired. This is all there is to it, I think. The part of me that's wobbly and tired seems to be the consistent me, whilst there is another me somewhere, but she seems to be in a different point in time, like a memory. I think I'm sitting down only to find that I'm standing up, and vice versa. I roll a cigarette and lift it to my mouth to smoke it, but it's disappeared. I roll another one, and again it's vanished. My friend C talks to radios, curtains, empty air. I think how bizarrely he's behaving. There's an overarching sense of murkiness, of being in a dark whirlpool. Movements are slow. I'm approached by a formless entity. I'm instructed in various details, yet I find myself in another room at the same time. I drink countless cups of water. I continue to try, futilely, to smoke a cigarette. Again, the cigarette has disappeared by the time I brought it to my lips. I walk into weird, cave-like atmospheres, Doctor Who-esque. They seem tubular and grainy. I spend a lot of time in those, come back out again, and I do not recall what's occurred. There's a low buzz in the room, and it seems minutes pass to walk from one room to another. When the room is not solid, it's comprised of waves, and I'm forced to sit down, only again, I'm standing up in a different spot. The air in the room is thick. The sense of doom in my gut is sickening. There are light voices around me, and I don't know which to follow or to listen to. Sometime later, it appears I've made my way back home. I'm in my bedroom. The bed is unmade as I'd left it, books stacked against the wall and on my bedside table. My clothes are on the window ledge with my jade plants and cacti facing the sun. On my bed, my friend D is reading my notebooks. I move closer to him and I can see my handwriting and drawings. A fight erupts since I would willingly let him read if only he'd ask. He tells me we're at his house, I'm not at home, and that he is not reading my notebooks, but a magazine. Such drowsiness, rivers of darkness, fear and sleepiness alternated with diversions by a door here, a person there, a whisper over there, and the endless phantom cigarettes. My friend C continues to appear to whisper his deepest secrets to the radio and to the curtains. His murmuring bothers me. I eventually fall into a shallow sleep, a sheet of black static punctuated by faces and sounds, waking me occasionally. The next day, we had to vote, and my friend D and I walked to the local school where the booths are set up. People, the street, and the sky appear wavery and insubstantial, and I stay close to my friend as we walk. Everything is extremely blurry, and I ask the poll person to read the candidates out to me with the excuse that I've left my glasses at home. After 2 days, my vision clears, but the following days are surreal and filled with dread. It was 11 years ago that I consumed Datura for the first and last time. I'd had plenty of experience with a number of substances by then and welcomed sideways shifts, but this was very different. One of the key challenges of Datura for me is that reality changes throughout, yet there is no underlying assumption that anything has changed. The consumption of the plant itself is eclipsed. Datura so seamlessly inserts me into another state that the new reality goes unquestioned. I found it exceedingly difficult to know where I was, what I was doing, and where to locate the singular me at the time, but that's in hindsight. At the time, the situation of me was not apparent as it is now. This experience was not linear or clear as it may sound from my description. Time and self were smudged all over the place. The perception and events were not interesting at the time, they were just like some upside-down day that I had to make the best of, and there's a lot I don't remember. I'm fortunate to recall what I do. All I gained was knowing that yet another realm is possible, which I guess has its own value. It was a glob of muddy chaos that made no sense. While some of the details I've noted might sound interesting or even tolerable, Datura ultimately gave me the sense of being trapped by a malevolent something that knew how to play with me and could have obliterated me if it had wished. I sensed a being that did not want me in its world. The theme of female apparitions continues in this next story. There is a Witch in My Room by Heinrich. A friend of mine found some datura growing next to the library at our college. He picked it to give to his roommate who was interested in trying it, but he read the experiences online and decided against it. I have regular piss tests thanks to the state of Maryland, so I was bored and looking for a new drug to try. I read that Datura was truly terrifying for many, and for some reason I really wanted to try it. After thinking about doing it for a few days, I decided on a Thursday night to eat 50 seeds. After about 45 minutes and no effects, I ate 100 more, and then after 15 minutes, another 100. I was getting angry that I was having no effects. Oh no, bad idea, don't get mad at Datura. She's gonna get ya. She's gonna get ya, Heinrich. I was looking for the most terrifying drug experience, but nothing was happening. After another half an hour, I started to feel a light buzz and found that everything felt lighter. I don't know what I was thinking or how intoxicated I actually was at the time, but I decided to eat 300 Morning Glory seeds that my friend had left over from experimenting with. About 20 minutes after eating the Morning Glory, I threw up, like I always do after eating Morning Glory. We left my friend's room and went downstairs to mine and smoked a little bit of pot, and I found it impossible to use the bowl. After taking a few hits, I remembered the piss test that I would have and started freaking the fuck out. I couldn't stop thinking about the possibility of going to jail. I kicked everyone out of my room, and the furniture in the room appeared to be floating 3 inches off the ground. I started seeing objects appear out of the floor and ceiling, and at first it was really fun. It felt like a normal LSA trip, but then the effects of Datura started. The things I was seeing in the ceiling started turning into violent scenes and faces in agony. I occasionally saw blood dripping from my ceiling. It was like my ceiling was turning into a Saw movie. It took about 20 minutes for me to realize that it was just a hallucination and decided to turn the lights off to make it stop. This made the trip fun again, and I laid down on my bed to try and relax. I was alone now and started feeling detached from everything in the world and may have fallen asleep. I suddenly started feeling intense anxiety for no reason, and when I looked in the corner of my room, I saw there was a woman there. I realized that she was a witch, and I was somewhat happy to see it because I didn't realize this was a real theme of Datura. The witch turned her head and she had no face except for yellow eyes. This scared the shit out of me. Every time I looked away, she looked away, and after a few minutes of finding the courage to look at her again, her eyes turned blood red. I wanted to get out of my room, but she was next to the door. I was trapped in my room because the window led to the roof where I knew I shouldn't go in my condition. I finally got up and turned the lights on and ran out of my room. I fought to get up to escape the witch that I thought was going to kill me. I don't know if I was dreaming about the witch or not, but either way, when I left my room, I didn't go back for 2.5 hours. I found my way outside and smoked a cigarette, and when I looked at the sky, the moon turned into a swastika. I was partially amazed and partially scared. When I looked away and looked back, the moon was gone, and I ran when people walked by me. I kept asking if they stole the moon and if the witch in my room was trying to kill me. After walking the halls and being incredibly frightened for another 2.5 hours, I went back in my room to go to sleep. I wanted nothing more than to sleep the trip off and return to reality. When I turned the lights off, I immediately lay down in my bed and never looked into the witch's corner. I eventually fell asleep and had some of the craziest dreams I've ever had. I slept through the next day, continuing to have interesting dreams, and I didn't feel right all day. I will not do Datura again, and it really did not produce any desirable effects. My hallucinations were violence, blood, agony, witches, and swastikas. It's been more than a month, and I still don't think I've completely recovered mentally. Our long, strange, terrifying, yet beautiful trip is almost coming to an end here. I know this one is long, but I thought it was fitting because Datura, the experience, is very long itself, and I wanted to get the whole vibe. So, again, we have another female apparition in this one. It is called I No Longer Live in the Real World by Into Life Slumber. It pretty much started when I was in high school. A good friend of mine and myself would spend all day dismissing our regular studies and study mostly on ancient herbs and assorted ethnobotanicals. Being a Native American, I was raised in a world of shamanic practice and teachings by my family. We would always know every, if not almost every, aspect of any entheogen we considered experimenting with beforehand. This was of great importance to me. I'd rather be smart about doing anything than take a chance and be dead. Anyway, Datura was a touchy subject that I thought about doing someday but wasn't in any kind of rush. Not to mention that my grandfather strongly recommended that I never take it unless her spirit deemed it in my best interests, but mostly because I was not qualified to do so by native custom. After I graduated from high school, I was a bit reluctant to go to college right away. I spent most of my time reading about random things and meditating. This is when I started my walk in life with Her Majesty. I was meditating one day and I was suddenly overcome with a warm feeling all over my body, and I felt a presence that I knew right away was the Datura spirit. She had come to me at last. For some reason, I just knew that she was telling me through her I would find the answer to the questions I'd been meditating on. I was living in a small town in southeast Texas at the time, and there were literally hundreds of Daturas all around me where I lived, so I quickly went to a wooded area a few blocks from my house, where I had seen 2 beautiful angel's trumpets shrubs which I had kept my eye on for quite some time. I asked her spirit to surrender an open pod of seeds so that I might sow her seeds and care for a plant or 2 of my own. I felt that growing my own plant was the only way I could prove my trust to her. Months had passed and turned into a year since I had planted my seeds, and I was anxious as hell to finally taste of my child and bear witness to her divine secrets. I had taken much patience and took great care of my now overly fruitful plants. Every night I would pray for it and speak with it and meditate on it. I finally decided it was time. I took of her 3 flowers which were not yet fully blossomed and 2 leaves. I then invited my friend over to sit with me as I spent time with the spirits. He was reluctant to do so, mostly because he still felt like it was a bad idea, but came over to ensure my safety. I boiled only 2 flowers and 1 leaf into a teapot for about 30 minutes, all while meditating and asking her spirit to be with me and to protect me during our venture. After letting the now greenish liquid cool for a while, I decided the only way to drink this tonic was with the help of some mellow tunes playing in the background. I didn't have any mellow tunes, however, so I sprung for the next greatest thing since sliced bread, Mr. Bungle. I put the CD on and... Wait, Mr. Bungle? Anyway, I put the CD on repeat and consumed my beverage. I'm not exactly one to ask if it tastes good or not. It surely doesn't taste like anything that should be allowed on the market, that's for certain. It's been 35 minutes. I'm beginning to feel very lightheaded, kind of like when I stand up too fast and lose touch for a while. My mouth is extremely dry and it's hard to quench my thirst. I decide to lay down on the floor directly facing my plant and close my eyes. With the bungle still raging on, I start to drift off and find myself entering into a dreamlike state, full of majestic landscapes and bright scenery. I was drifting along, losing touch with reality, speaking to the animals that I passed by, and they would speak back. It was incredible, and I felt at one with Mother Nature and never wanted to leave the world I was in. I completely forgot Tim was there until he shouted at me, "Are you okay, man? You've been laying there not moving for like 3 hours." That was impossible. It only seemed like 5 minutes. I reassured him that all was well, though I don't think he understood me because he kept asking me what I was talking about, and every time I tried to explain to him what was going on and how great it was, he would just blankly stare at me in confusion like I wasn't speaking English. Finally, I just gave him a reassuring thumbs up to communicate what body language I could. "All right then," he returned. "I'm gonna take a nap for a while. Let me know if you need anything." I told him okay and let him sleep in my bed for a while as I finished my journey. But first, I thought, I need some water. I went into the kitchen to get a drink of water from a Long John silver glass, a glass that I had lost years ago and never saw since. But when I reached in to get my Bretta out of the fridge, the glass disappeared. And then, when I looked back at the fridge, it wasn't the fridge at all. I was opening my medicine cabinet. This made me giggle so much I almost pissed myself. Thank God I was already in the bathroom. After I took a piss, I went back into the den and lay on the couch for a while. To my surprise, I came into a full house. Many of my friends, it seems, invited themselves to a party at my house that I didn't even know was going on. This didn't bother me though, and I told one of my friends who was talking about my Mr. Bungle CD and replacing it with some good old November, my favorite band of all time, to make sure he remembered to lock the door after letting anyone in. I'm not sure if he was the one who let everyone in or not. A few hours went by and I was having some very deep conversations with many of my friends about random theories and philosophies. At one point, I went into the kitchen to get some Doritos of the salsa verde variety to share with my friends, who I assumed deserved a good treat. However, when I got back, everyone was gone and my Mr. Bungle CD was still playing. Then a woman walked from my bedroom, a woman I had never seen before. I remember her like I remember my own name. She was so beautiful. Her hair was dark, vibrant red. Her deep green eyes were full of compassion and warmth. She looked at me like a daughter would look at her father after a long embrace. She spoke to me and didn't move her mouth. Rather, I would understand what she was communicating without using words. She was the spirit of my plant. She expressed gratitude for caring for her and helping her grow all this time. In that moment, I felt like I was loved unconditionally. No matter how alone I felt, she would always love me. I was her father, and she was my daughter. I don't remember much more of that night. I woke up the next day at around 11 p.m. I had drank the tea at roughly 4 p.m. the previous day. Tim was gone. I talked to him later on that day and told him what I had experienced, and he asked me if he was still my daughter. Dumbfounded, I asked him what he was talking about. He told me that he came to check on me because I kept yelling something about how there's no such thing as rain, and I kept running back and forth in the house with a bag of Doritos which had been opened from the bottom, and all the chips had fallen on the floor and were infinitely trampled. Then he said, when he came into my room, I looked at him and started to tear up and kept mumbling something like, "My daughter, you're my daughter." This made me laugh so hard I almost pissed myself again. Oh yeah, I had also written all over my walls with many colored crayons some kind of symbology that I'd never seen before. Anyway, this was the first of many wonderful Datura experiences. I'm glad I've found a bond of love with this plant and her spirit. She's never betrayed me, nor I her. One time, I was with her by myself and I almost walked into a busy interstate. If it weren't for some road construction guys there to save my neck, I could have been squashed. Take care, and respect Mother Earth. The contrast between this story and There's a Witch in My Room by Heinrich is kind of crazy. They're similar in ways in that there was a female apparition, but Heinrich definitely entered the experience with an unsavory attitude, I will say. No offense to you. You could be a great person. We've all made mistakes, we've all tried to unintentionally maybe take advantage of a substance, enter into it without the proper respect. And I think with a plant like this, with such a strong personality, it's a good idea to ask before you go into it. Like this last story, how he asked for a seed pod before he even took one and grew it himself and cared for it. And I think that made all the difference, It's just, I don't know, it's interesting to me how your intentions in all aspects of life, they really affect your experience, even if it's supposedly towards an inanimate object or something that's not recognized to be conscious by science. I also thought it was very sweet how he got a bag of chips for his own hallucinations. That was very kind of him. Take good care of your hallucinations. Offer them some Doritos, salsa verde Doritos. They could be hungry. Unfortunately, this is the end. If you've stuck with me this long, thank you. I hope you've enjoyed these fantastical, dreamlike stories. I have to admit, I am curious about Datura. I know that I'm probably the worst contender in the world. I think I would take it and then end up blacking out and stealing a semi-truck and driving to Arkansas or something and blowing up a building on accident. But there is something very enticing about these experiences, at least how they're written, which is, I assume, why everyone tried them in the first place. Just curiosity, huh? You know what they say. But never fear, I'm not going to submit to my curious desires. I'll be back again to read more stories to you. I'm not entirely sure how to recap this episode. It was very odd, to say the least. I guess all I can say is that our reality is just a thin curtain that we occasionally get to peek behind, and the mystery will probably never be solved, but certain people get to see a little more than others. So with that, to all you beautiful people out there, goodbye and good night.
Start out walking and yet we've just begun.
If you enjoyed the music tonight, check out my Bandcamp pages, djfamilyrecipe.bandcamp.com and reptileghost.bandcamp.com.